My name is Jennifer Staley, and I'm completing my master's in education technology from York College of Pennsylvania. At the completion of my program, I will also be receiving my instructional technology specialist certificate. The title of my action research project is Professional Development to Increase Teacher Self-Efficacy at Upper SAMR Levels. Some of the accomplishments of my project were increased teacher self-efficacy regarding technology integration for all participants, and Nearpod usage that met the modification and redefinition levels of SAMR by all participants. I'm going to talk a little bit now about some of the tools I used to judge whether or not these criteria were being met. So I used this survey of teachers' knowledge of teaching and technology, both prior to the professional development and then again as a post-assessment at the conclusion of my professional development sessions. And this survey was based upon the TPAC model. So some of the questions included, I know about technologies that I can use for understanding and doing literacy. And then participants chose whether they strongly disagreed, they neither agreed nor disagreed, whether they agreed or whether they strongly agreed. And there were point values associated with each of those categories. Another question was, I know about technologies that I can use for understanding and doing social studies. Literacy and social studies were the two content areas that I focused on because those are the two subject areas that my team members teach. So then another question was, I can choose technologies that enhance teaching approaches for a lesson. I can choose technologies that enhance students' learning for a lesson. I am thinking critically about how to use technology in my classroom. I can adapt the use of technologies that I am learning about to different teaching activities. I can select technologies to use in my classroom that enhance what I teach, how I teach, and what students learn. I can provide leadership in helping others to coordinate the use of content, technologies, and teaching approaches at my school and/or district. I can teach lessons that appropriately combine literacy, technologies, and teaching approaches. And I can teach lessons that appropriately combine social studies, technologies, and teaching approaches. So by keeping my survey fairly short, only 10 questions, I was able to get 100% participation. All of my participants completed the survey, so I was able to get good data from that. So now you're looking at the results of my initial teacher self-efficacy survey, those questions that we just looked at. And when I did do the post-assessment, which I'll show in just a moment, you can see that there was a definite increase in self-efficacy that was seen. So here you can see that there are definitely more responses in the 3 category, which that was the strongly agree category, whereas in that initial survey, we're not seeing many of those at all. So I did see an increase when I did give the post-assessment. Now, as far as the Nearpod usage that met the modification and redefinition levels of SAMR, I do have a rubric that I used to kind of score all of the lessons that were turned in with lesson plans. So participants had to give me a week's worth of lesson plans, both at the beginning of the professional development and then again at the end of the professional development so that I could see whether or not the professional development was increasing that likelihood of them using Nearpod lessons at those upper levels of SAMR. So we're going to take a look at the rubric that I used. Okay, so the SAMR rubric that I used had 2 criteria, and that was curricular goals and SAMR framework. So the lessons that were turned into me were supposed to align with our existing curriculum. And then I also scored them based upon where they fell on the SAMR framework, whether they were redefinition, modification, augmentation, and substitution. As you can see from my initial lesson plan submission, there are no scores because there were no lessons submitted with any technology integration at all that I could score. So there's NA kind of across the board. Nobody was integrating technology into the curriculum at all, which really didn't surprise me because the curriculum for us is very new and we are still being held to a standard by which we are teaching with fidelity. So finding ways to integrate technology has not been easy, which is kind of the reason that I was really looking forward to this professional development. Now, if we look at the final lesson plan submission, which is down towards the bottom of the screen, you'll notice that all participants turned in lessons and activities, which really isn't surprising because of the way that we set up the professional development. We all kind of walked away with 11 activities that we were able to use in the coming weeks. So, as you can see, all participants were utilizing technology at either a 7 or an 8 on that SAMR rubric that I showed previously, showing me that my professional development in this case was, in fact, effective. Some of the challenges to my project were as follows. So, Nearpod has a new pricing structure. And at the beginning of the school year, my assistant superintendent kind of pulled me aside and asked me about my project and just kind of warned me about Nearpod's new pricing structure. I was unaware of it. And at that time, he kind of assured me that we would be figuring out a way to purchase Nearpod. But when I was in a meeting with my principal just last week, he kind of said, don't hang your hat on Nearpod because the district might not purchase it based upon the new pricing, which is not good for this professional development or my grade level team because we've just now spent a lot of time creating Nearpods that fit into our curriculum. But I'm kind of hoping that this professional development and the fact that it was successful and we were able to create a lot of lessons and activities, that could kind of help us make a case to somehow purchase Nearpod, at least for us to use, since we've put all this work in. Another challenge that I found was just time. We had some additional learning focused schools tasks for this year that we had to work on that took up kind of a lot of our time. It's taken up a lot of our professional development time and even time outside of that. We've had to go through our curriculum because it's new and make sure that it is aligning to what we need it to align to and looking for those gaps and all of that. Also, we have been integrating social studies this year, which we kind of tried to work into our professional development because some of our lessons are related to social studies and some of that content that we needed to fit in. But just sort of taking a course that used to be a standalone course and finding ways to integrate it into our ELA has been quite a challenge this year, and it also has taken up a lot of our time. And also just beginning of the year teacher tired. So I chose to complete my professional development project in the beginning of the school year, kind of the first semester. And as all of us teachers know that beginning of the year teacher tired is a real thing. So just kind of trying to stay inspired, trying to keep my colleagues inspired throughout all of that was kind of a challenge. But we all pulled through and we relied on one another and we made it work, as we always do. As far as lessons learned, the first would be to just take charge. I am the newest teacher on my team, so it put me in kind of a weird spot trying to lead my team in a professional development because I felt like, I've been there the least amount of time. I shouldn't be the one that's in charge. I didn't want them to feel like I knew more than they do or I was discrediting all of the years of service that they have and the wonderful things that they're doing in their classroom. Um, but they didn't see it like that. So I think that in the future, I need to just be aware that I should have a little more confidence in myself. And as long as you're not approaching people as though you do know more than they do, they are typically pretty receptive, which in this case they were. Also, working on a common problem can bring people together. So we don't get a lot of common planning time. We used to get 2 class periods per cycle that we had team meetings and we were able to get together and work on curriculum and talk about problems. But that was taken out of our schedule 2 years ago. So we don't get that much time to work together. So I think just parsing out this little bit of extra time for this professional development has really kind of brought us together again and united us in a way that has sort of made our department stronger. And also, I've learned not to be afraid to stretch my colleagues. I knew that what I was asking of my colleagues was going to be kind of difficult. It was going to be time consuming. It was just going to be one more thing that they had to fit in. But once they were able to see how engaged students were and how using technology in their classrooms, especially some of those self-paced Nearpods, they were able to kind of multiply themselves, so to speak. So they were able to flip some lessons and get some extra content in a meaningful way. So once they were able to see that it was going to benefit the kids, they were willing to put the effort in, which was really great. Moving forward. Moving forward, I hope to continue this PLN that has been established. I want to have my team continue to parse out some time to work together so that we do have good stuff to offer our students. So we are doing the best that we can. And I also want to recommend this format to my administration for other grade levels and content areas. So I'm working on a presentation for them at this point so that I can share the results of this project so that they can kind of see how effective it has been and how it's sort of changed our teaching practices a little bit, more so than our previous kind of sit and get professional developments, because we are required to have 4 hours of professional development in technology integration per year. But typically that is just a 1 hour workshop session that kind of gets checked off the list and move forward. So I'm hoping that if we can create more PLNs that are sustained, that are collaborative, that are content focused, that we will see a shift in teaching practice in my school.